going to do this.
You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name and politics is our game, and we will be doing lots of politics and public policy this evening because we have as our guest Mary Mitchell, who of course is a longtime columnist for the Chicago Sun-Times. She has been there, this is going on 17 or 18 years?
Right, 18 years.
Covering education, the courts, the city beat, and now you're just, a roaming columnist? You can just write about like whatever you want?
Well, I can write about social justice issues, things that I'm interested in. Right now, for the moment, I'm writing a lot of political stuff, but I cover criminal justice. I'm very interested in the disparities you find in the criminal justice system, wrongful convictions. I write a lot about that, and some gender issues, some politics. So you're right, roaming columnist.
33 days ago, Barack Obama was elected President of the United States, obviously the first African-American President of the United States. If you go back and trace, you've written a lot and thought about race and history of politics. What does it mean that Barack Obama is now President of the United States? Is it time to turn, for the country to turn and focus on issues of income inequality and poverty, but not so much on race, on other minorities? What can we conclude that Barack Obama is now the President of the United States? Is the President-elect of the United States. On January 20, he will be President of the United States.
All right. Well, the first thing I think is that you can't conclude that we have ended racism in this country. I think what you can say is that a very brilliant, talented, politically savvy, really smart candidate happened to be identified as African American. And every time I hear people say that, I wonder, well, are we still talking about the one-drop rule? Because he is basically not the first African American. He's the first non-Caucasian male to go into the White House. He is biracial. His mother was white, his father was from Africa, Kenyan. And so in this country, biracial people usually don't identify themselves as African American. They identify themselves as biracial.
But he did. Did you ever hear him say biracial?
I have never heard him say African American. I have never heard him say, I am an African American candidate.
You haven't? Okay.
Never. Have you heard him say that?
When he ran for the Senate, you're right, he was quite clear running in the U.S. Senate. He was not running, I think the line I remember most is he said he might be rooted in the African American community, but he is not limited to it. And he made a point of saying, when a lot of people doubted this, running in the Democratic primary, which before the presidency was really his race, the toughest race, really other than the Bobby Rush thing, the only contested race. He made a point of saying he would be competitive in every demographic throughout the state of Illinois. So again,
and he was competitive.
But
I have never heard, we've defined him, the media has defined him. First off, we define him as the first African American candidate who seriously was a serious contender for the presidency. And that happened, during the primary. I have never heard him stand there and say, I am an African American candidate.
Well, you know what, maybe it was just me, but he was on the show Public Affairs 2001, 2004, 4 or 5 times. In fact, people can find out more about that. Go to nytimes.com. That's the New York Times webpage. And then click on video and click on most popular views, and you'll see 5 minutes, the fastest 5 minutes of the web about Barack Obama and public affairs. And every time he was on here, I'd go through his introduction, and I remember one aspect of his introduction that I said every time was he is the first African-American president of the Harvard Law Review, which he was. Now, I said that, he didn't, but he never corrected me and said something that's not accurate.
He never corrected, and he will not correct, but we're talking about self-identification. And we're talking about the reality that he is biracial. He's biracial.
Well, but I think I've heard him say, and I don't know if it was on the show or elsewhere, but I thought I had heard him say at some point when we talked, the first show we did was all about racial profiling, a half hour on that in 2001, when that was a pretty big issue in his legislation. But I thought I've heard him say, when he's trying to get a cab in New York City, they don't see biracial, they saw Barack Obama and African American. I don't know.
Well,
I can't
that's
remember
what they say.
Okay.
We're talking about what he is.
Well, but I think he feels that identification.
Well, okay. Well,
I don't know, but I want to go on the whole show about it.
I'll let you have that.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is that's his individual achievement. And I don't think we can look at his achievement and say, oh, now that he has broken that ceiling, that means race is no longer an issue in this country. There's always been exceptional African Americans. There's always been, that was viewed as exceptional. Oprah, for instance, because Oprah made billions of dollars in the entertainment industry, does that mean racism was over? Because if you look at a Michael Jordan's career, for instance, because he was celebrated as one of the most gifted athletes in the world, practically, did that mean now that racism was over? And because Barack Obama has gone to the White House does not mean racism has ended in this country. What it means is we've made great progress when that many white people can look at him and see beyond his color. Because his color, regardless of what he is, his color is brown. They can look at him and say, you know what, we're gonna give him a chance to fix what's wrong in America. That's what it says. Progress has been made, not that racism
Well, I
has ended.
agree with you in this sense. Every time he was on the show and he sat here, I don't think I was conscious of the fact, it sounds like, and I don't mean it in anything other than factual, I don't think I was conscious of the fact for those 30 minutes that he was African American and I was white. We were two people sitting around talking about issues. And I think this is the magic of Barack Obama to me. I had the impression when I was talking to him, nobody else was involved. This was just Barack and Berkowitz talking public policy.
Oh,
and I don't think
charismatic in that
he can
way.
do that with everybody.
Yes,
right?
he can. You can
he
always
gives everybody
feel
the feeling it is Barack and that person, whoever it is.
the only person in the room. I mean,
Right.
that's his gift. And I think his
But
wife, Michelle, has the same gift.
But more than that, we could talk about race without any consciousness of the fact that he was African American. At least I could. And that's different. I've had other African Americans on the show. I have you on the show, and I don't know how it'll be, because we'll go out and find out. But I think it is different. I think for one reason or another, I was more conscious of the fact of race with other African Americans than Barack. But I don't even know that it's because he's biracial.
Well, I think
it's
it
something
is.
else.
I think it is because he's biracial. I think it is because he's raised in a white household and he's very comfortable. He's very comfortable with you, and you're very comfortable with him. The average black person has never had that kind of contact with whites. They don't live in their homes. They weren't brought up by them. They haven't seen how they live. Our interactions are something from a distance. So to sit down with a Barack Obama and have a conversation with him, he understands where white people are coming from. That's why in his campaign, he avoided the issue of race. There was no
Until
white,
he had to, with
he
Pastor
was forced,
Wright.
He was
That's when he was
forced to do
deal
it.
with it, right.
Right, because he understood that whites don't want to go around feeling guilty all the time about what happened, 200, 300 years ago. They want to get past it, and he understood it.
But it was more than they don't want to feel guilty. I don't think he felt that they should. I could be wrong. I mean, I think he felt like when he ran for the U.S. Senate, he said the issues in this race are jobs and health care and education. Of course, race is always an issue somewhere for anybody running, white or black, in this country. I shouldn't say always, but it is now in 2008. I agree with you. It's not like races. Somehow we're oblivious to race. But I don't think he felt in his heart of hearts his race for the U.S. Senate and subsequently his race for the president was that he is a black person running for president. He is a Barack Obama running for president who happens to be African American.
I think
that's the difference.
I think he feels that way, and I think he's also a very brilliant man. If he had played it any other way, we would not be talking about President-elect Barack Obama right now. He was clear that if you talk about the issues that we don't have to frame as race, we talk about the economy, which was going down the tubes. If we talk about education, if we talk about health care that everyone needs, if you left race out of that conversation, you could bring people together. Because the moment you introduce race, people bring their own baggage with that conversation, and it can be a very divisive conversation.
Well, let us see. If we go do a little bit of history very quickly, because we don't have 143 years, we only got 30 minutes or so, maybe 20 minutes left. But as I mark it, and tell me if you disagree, 143 years ago, the Constitution of the United States was amended to abolish slavery, 13th Amendment. Let me just set out some milestones and see if they mean anything as we proceed from what is that, 143 years ago, so that would be 1865 to the present. 140 years ago, the Constitution was amended to make all persons born in the United States citizens of the United States, and bar any state from depriving any person of life, liberty, or property without due process, the famous due process clause, as you know, of the 14th Amendment.
Right.
The equal protection of the laws clause of the 14th Amendment. 138 years ago, the Constitution was amended to bar the U.S. or any state from denying or abridging the right of citizens of the U.S. to vote. The 15th Amendment. Nobody refers to it. You might have thought that would be the Voting Rights Amendment.
Right. Mm-hmm.
We'll get to the voting rights that people refer to. 88 years ago, the Constitution was amended to bar the U.S. or any state from denying or abridging the right of citizens of the U.S. to vote on account of sex. I guess these days we'd say gender, or basically women were given the right to vote. The 19th Amendment in 1920. 54 years ago, Brown v. Board of Education, which many people thought was then an historic ruling by the Supreme Court, striking down separate but equal in terms of education. Notice we're still now only to 1954. 45 years ago, as you know, Martin Luther King gave the speech, a dream that his 4 little kids would one day live in a nation where they would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. That's 1963. 44 years ago, the Civil Rights Act was passed. 43 years ago, the Voting Rights Act was passed. 30 years ago, Bakke decision from the Supreme Court, which, although the plaintiff won, essentially upheld affirmative action, as I see it.
Okay.
16 years ago, Bill Clinton, who called himself the first African-American president.
Toni Morrison called him that. He just accepted it.
He accepted. I stand corrected. He was elected. 33 days ago, as we said, Barack Obama, the first real African-American president, maybe we could say that, was elected. You know, when you trace those things out, we try to put things in perspective, and you said racism still exists, we can't conclude. But what do you conclude, Mary Mitchell, from that, going back to 1865 to where we are at 2008? What stands out? Anything there?
Well,
everything stands out?
Well, first of all, great progress has been made, no doubt about it. But I think that when we look at all those milestones, you can still look at the fact that Brown versus Board of Education, bottom line is, kids are still in segregated schools right now today in the city of Chicago. You have all black schools. You have communities where kids are getting a second-class education. You have the redistribution of poverty into communities. And when we're talking about public accommodations and housing, now you have no housing projects, and you have the redevelopment of slums, because you have areas now where low-income people are being concentrated. When you talk about healthcare disparities and the fact that African Americans are more likely to die of all kind of diseases, and you can't, every time you bring this issue up and you talk to doctors and medical associations about it, the one thing they are clear on is that African Americans and some other racial groups are getting less access to health care. That's after all these laws have been passed and all these milestones have been met. We are still seeing institutionalized racism in this country. And I'm not saying it's not like it was before the amendments. You can't say it's the same thing, but it's still there.
Let me talk solutions then. I mean, let me agree with you. I certainly on education agree with you that minorities and African Americans in particular in the city of Chicago get an inferior education on average, get an inferior education to white people who are basically educated either in the few good schools in the city of Chicago, and I think relatively few good schools, who one way or another they are there, or educated in the suburbs, or educated. But the amount of money spent in the Chicago public schools, and a lot of people don't realize this, $6 billion budget, 370,000 students, it's $16,000 per kid per year. So people who believe more in the free market than in government say, take that $16,000, give that money to the parents of those kids and say, if you're happy, and some are happy with the education in the Chicago public schools, stay there. If you're not, go to the private school of your choice. And if you had that kind of purchasing power, all sorts of private schools would pop up that don't currently exist. School choice, school vouchers. Mary Mitchell, Barack Obama and Michelle Obama just exercised choice where they send their daughters.
Right. And they sent their kids to private school anyway when they were in Chicago. They were going to University of Chicago Lab School. So
Malia and Sasha, and now they're paying $57,000 to go to Sidwell Friends. Well, we can't do that. We can't offer everybody $57,000 for their 2 kids, or $30,000 per kid, but we could offer the $16,000 without it costing anybody anything. Nobody'd have to pay more in the suburbs. You wouldn't have to pay more. I wouldn't. We're
Well, I
spending
think-
$16,000 now, give them that choice, and then there'd be competition,
Oh,
innovation,
I've been
all
a-
sorts of ways. So tell me, Mary Mitchell, do you favor school choice,
I've
school
always
vouchers?
favored school choice, and I've always thought that the Democratic leaders, and especially in the black community, were out of step with the community. People want their kids to be educated. Those folks who are, I know people who take their money and you know, they drive a ragged car, they don't buy fancy clothes, they live in
They scrape the funds together to
affordable,
get out of the Chicago
affordable
public
housing.
schools.
They scrape their money together, and their aunts scrape it. They go to their relatives and gather up money from them to pay for private education because they want their kids to get the
Okay,
best
so
education.
let me get, you favor school vouchers,
I've
school
always
choice?
favored
You would
school
favor
choice.
my program, taking the $16,000, give it to the parents in the Chicago public schools?
Yes, I
Go to
would.
school of your
Yes, I
choice.
would. I think that would be a step toward ending the disparities in education. It doesn't mean that it'll end racism, though.
We'll get to that. But you know, Barack Obama sat in this chair in June of 2002, and I asked him about that. And he all but said he would support school vouchers. He said, admittedly, the conditions in the Chicago public schools are intolerable in the inner cities and in Chicago. And he said, we'd look at this, and he would do anything. He would do anything that would be better for the kids. 1 year later, he sat in that chair in July of 2003, and he said he's for charter schools, but not for vouchers.
Right. He
Is
said
that,
that before
is
the
that
editorial board.
Is that the influence of teachers' unions? Even somebody who you and I respect, like Barack Obama, his intellect, his concern, his carefulness, he had to succumb to the teachers' unions because nobody's getting elected to anything in Illinois in a Democratic primary without the teachers' union, so he wasn't going to get elected to the U.S. Senate.
Well,
he had to
I-
do that. Now he had to do that to get elected to president.
Well,
mean,
I think so.
Is that right?
And I think
Okay.
that's the reality. The reality is that hope is met up with pragmatism. Throughout the campaign, it was a very good, speech, and he talked about education and how to improve education, all those things. Talked about healthcare a lot too, but we haven't heard healthcare mentioned, these days because everybody's focusing on the economy, and so he's going to have to scale back some of his big plans and some of his big promises. That's being very pragmatic, and I think that's the thing that people don't think about when they talk about Barack Obama's campaign. They talk about all the speeches and how he brought out the crowds and how charismatic he is, but the bottom line is he's also very pragmatic. That's how he's able to marshal all those forces and harness the energy of the internet to put together an unprecedented amount of money to even launch a credible campaign.
Pragmatic, balanced, cautious,
Right.
all those adjectives come to mind. But
Right.
on the bailouts, which was the big economic issue of the day, is there any difference between the policy that Barack Obama apparently favors? Bailing out, Bush bailed out AIG, Bear Stearns, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, you name it, they bailed them out, $700 billion. Sounds like Barack Obama, as a presidential candidate, basically agreed with Bush 100% on that.
Oh, well, 100%, except that I think that he put on the table there has to be some conditions that are met for the bailout. So anyway, if there's even if the auto manufacturers, for instance, he's going to bail them out, if the taxpayers are going to take the burden of spending all that money, then he has to get something. I think he's laid some conditions down about what he wants to see happen. We didn't kind of get that kind of transparency when Bush made a decision. And
For
when
Wall Street, well, he could have done it. I mean, Barack was running for the presidency, and I didn't hear him say he would support the bailout if there were ABC conditions on the financial institutions that received it. He just said he supported it.
No.
He could have tried to
He
change
sat
the
at the
legislation.
table and he said, and I don't want to be quoted on this because I can't remember exactly what he said, but he definitely outlined some conditions for a bailout.
So that's the difference you're saying
I think
between
so.
him and Bush on those
Right,
particular
that
policies.
he wants conditions. He's not just about giving the money, just turn it over to any bank or institution or the auto industry. There are some conditions that he has asked for.
What, as you look at it, would be the most important piece of legislation to be supported, or that could be supported by Barack Obama, that would make a difference in people's lives who are low income?
Oh, the most important one, I think, will be education. He has to fix the education system. Kids can't wait.
But by doing what? Should he come out for school vouchers?
Well, school vouchers would help.
Will he do that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I can't say that he will. I'm not his advisor. I think we probably have
No,
to ask Valerie Jarrett about that.
But you know Valerie, and you know Barack. And
Well, I don't think he will.
You know Barack going back 10 years. You know longer than I do.
I do not think that he would do that, but you asked me what
So
would
what
I
will he
think
do?
would be a
Expand
good
charter
thing.
schools? Is that what he'll do?
He may do that.
Inspire that and encourage that, whatever a president could do?
I think he has to do. I think he has to make sure that education is on the fast track. Just like he talks about the economy, and the economy, we got to do this and we got to hit the ground running and blah, blah, blah. He has to do that about education. These kids can't wait, because you cannot do anything about poverty, you cannot do anything about crime, you cannot raise poor kids up out of poverty unless you deal with education. We've got to fix the schools, and he's got to make that his
So, but he has to
priority.
take on the teachers' unions because
Yes, he does.
they don't want expansion of charter schools. You know, here in Chicago or elsewhere, they don't want that.
If the teachers
Let
union
alone
is
the
standing
school
in the
vouchers,
way,
they certainly don't want.
if the teachers union is standing in the way, then he has to address them in the same way he talked about lobbyists. He said lobbyists would not run his administration. He can't let the teachers union run it either.
Minimum wages. You know, there are economists who say minimum wages are counterproductive because when you raise the wage above the market wage, less is demanded, fewer people are demanded, more is supplied, you increase unemployment. The people who get jobs get higher wages, but more people get less jobs. Economists who studied this say actually the impact is felt most on minorities because these are the people with the fewest skills. They need more skills, they need more education, but in the moment they need a job. If you raise the minimum wage, you actually push them out of the marketplace. This is contrary to everything the Democratic Party stands for. Barack Obama has been a big supporter of minimum wages and unions.
Well,
Do you think he should rethink that?
No, I don't think he should rethink it, because he will lose a whole lot of support if he does.
But maybe you can do that as a president. If you turn it around and you see unemployment increases in the minority community.
Here's the base. Well, first of all, I think they say that the base for Barack Obama's campaign was middle class, but I think that ignores the fact that there were many working class people and poor people who went to the polls in great numbers. Old ladies on canes and young people who never voted before came out to support him. What that community understands is that they want to make a living wage. They want to be able to pay their rent and buy gas and buy food on their income. So if Barack Obama begins to support the idea that somehow minimum wage is going to be a bad thing for that community, he's going to lose support, because people in that community, all they see is, I want to get paid a living wage, because that's what it's going to take for me to take care of my
But
family.
economists tell us the way people get a so-called living wage is they get better skills, they get better training, they get better education, they become more productive, and then they're rewarded with a better wage.
That's what they say, but economists...
Do you agree with that?
The economists these days have made some pretty poor calls. That's why we're in the mess that we're in. So I don't think anybody's listening to those economists as quickly, as closely as they were listening to
But
them
you
in the
agreed, you
past.
started out talking about education as being the most important thing he can do.
It is.
And that's what economists would say. That's another word for skills or training or human capital. It's all the same thing. If Barack Obama improves the quality of education, and I don't know if a president can do this, it's more of a state and local issue. You know
There's
that.
some things that he can
He
do.
can do.
Bush did. He did the No Child Left Behind.
And they both supported it, and Barack supported that.
He did it poorly, because he did it without funding it fully. He did it without really holding teachers as accountable as he should have. Why is it that inner city schools and urban schools are getting all the bad teachers, the unqualified teachers, who are teaching out of their subject? The teachers have been bounced around the system. Why do they end up in poor schools?
Because the poor schools have the least to pay and then the least to offer in terms of working conditions. Again, it comes back to vouchers. If parents in say Chicago had that $16,000 to spend at the school of choice, I assure you good quality teachers would flow to those areas, to flow to those schools where people who were paid the most, not by how long they had been in that school, but who was the best teacher.
I'm on
So
the
with
same
competition
page.
and free market?
I'm on the same page with you.
But you have to figure out a way to get competition and innovation and purchasing power to the minority parents. You have to empower the parents,
If it takes
not the teachers, the parents.
If it takes vouchers to jumpstart the education system, then I'm all for it, and I think that's something that Barack Obama ought to look at.
And if he were here, you would tell him that, right?
Of course I would.
Okay. Todd Stroger, Cook County. Is he good for the low-income people in Cook County who require the Health Bureau services, and instead they get the friends and patronage from family and friends of Todd Stroger on the budget? And so, really, is Forrest Claypool the person who should have been elected and should have been supported by the minority community in 2006?
Well,
when Forrest was running for president of the Cook County Board against John Stroger in the Democratic primary.
Okay, so let's take this one little bit at a time.
Let's go back to John Stroger.
We'll go back to John Stroger. John Stroger was beloved in the African American community because of the patronage, okay? That's the bottom line. There's no way of getting around it. These were people who lived in the 8th Ward, and the people who knew him and was outside of city government. He brought them in. He gave them an opportunity. He
That's
gave
a
them
small
a job.
number of people.
Now let me just say this.
Okay.
No, it wasn't a small number of people.
Well,
when you
relative
add
to the
them
number
up.
of people voting.
Okay, when you
couldn't
add,
give everybody a job.
couldn't
as
give
well.
everybody a job, but just like Mayor Daley can't give everybody a job. But we know that there are certain strategic jobs that landed under the purview of folks who supported Daley. Well, that system exists, and people who live in Chicago and live in Cook County understand that system. Now, Todd Stroger happens to be the symbolic of everything that's wrong with Cook County government. One, because of the process of how he got his job in the first place. Two, he was seen as unqualified and just put on the ticket because he was able, the Democratic supporters were able to do that. And three, he didn't really want the job in the first place. There was no energy coming from Todd. So he has become the face of a dysfunctional government. Cook County hasn't functioned in a very long time.
So this time around, if the choice in 2010 is between Todd Stroger and Forrest Claypool in the Democratic primary for Cook County Board President, are you telling minorities, and in particular African Americans, should be supporting Forrest Claypool?
I think they might. People are upset. They're upset when they can't go to the Cook County Hospital or John Stroger Hospital now and get their medications, or have to wait for days to get a prescription.
They're
filled.
suffering from the inefficiency and the waste and the blows of Cook County that benefits Todd and his family and friends.
They suffer from any waste and corruption. They suffered when it was under Mayor Daley's
Why
office.
did Barack
and it was
Obama,
waste.
when he had the choice in 2006 between supporting his friend Forrest Claypool, who would work for him and to elect him for the U.S. Senate, Barack Obama sat on the fence. He did not endorse in that Democratic primary between John Stroger and his good friend Forrest Claypool.
Todd Stroger?
No,
John Stroger.
between John Stroger.
Right.
He didn't endorse. Was it because he didn't want to upset Mayor Daley, who thought he might need the 8th Ward in that organization? Or was it because he, Barack Obama, an African American, didn't want to be criticized for supporting a white person, Forrest Claypool, over a black person, John Stroger?
Oh, I think the second
Or some
part
other
of
reason.
the second part of
Race?
your race, the second part of your
was it.
scenario. No, I don't believe
No,
that
it wasn't race.
No, one, because
Well, what was it? He didn't want to
I have
upset
no
Mayor
idea.
Daley?
First of all, I have no idea. I mean, that's a question that if you get a chance to ask Barack Obama, please ask him, because
You got
I've
plenty
always
of
wondered.
ideas because you follow this stuff much more than I do.
No. Let me tell you why I don't know. When that happened, I didn't quite understand whether or not it was a strategic move, the relationship between Forrest Claypool, David Axelrod, Mayor Daley, all of that. All of those things went into play. So I had no idea whether it was because of he's looking down the road and saying he's going to need this support, or whether it's because he just didn't, he wasn't see that job for
We got to
Claypool.
interrupt and only say we're going to continue to speak as the credits roll, but we very much want to thank our guests, Mary Mitchell, Chicago Sun-Times columnist. You can read her, is it Tuesday, Thursdays, and Sundays?
That's right.
Okay, every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday in the Chicago Sun-Times. You oughtn't to miss Mary Mitchell anytime. She's often on TV, not just on Public Affairs, but on Chicago Tonight, on WTEW, on Fox even. She doesn't even mind. You're
Haven't been on Fox for a while, thank goodness.
accurate to say, though, you're not somebody who's down the road liberal. I mean, that
No,
is
I'm
somebody
not.
you wouldn't want to be characterized that way,
No,
would
I'm
you?
not.
You'd be offended. You'd be
No
offended.
down the road liberal, no.
So you're somebody who calls them as you see
I'm an
them?
independent.
You want to be known as an independent.
I am an independent.
You are an independent.